Food fraud or not? The trouble with fakes. Usually, when something fishy occurs, there's no difficulty in deciding whether it is or is not actually food fraud. For example, if someone sells pangasius fish fillets but tells their customers it is cod, then that's food fraud. Simple. But every now and then I discover reports of food fraud that don't seem quite right. The academic world has been arguing for years about how to define food fraud. I'm happy to leave them to it. Here is the definition that I use. Food fraud occurs when food or drink is sold in a way that deliberately misleads or deceives consumers or customers for financial gain. And that definition is derived from Spink, Moyer and Speier-Pero and from the peer-reviewed journal Food Control. Of course, there's a link in the email, as always. Sourdough or sour-faux? What is authentic sourdough bread? And if a bread is labelled sourdough and it doesn't meet certain standards of authenticity, are consumers actually misled? A food and farming group in the United Kingdom has accused supermarkets of misleading consumers by labelling breads that contain ingredients including palm oil and commercial yeast as sourdough. Is this food fraud? Well, it's complicated. And thinking about my definition of food fraud as well. If the supermarkets are deliberately misleading consumers, then I would argue, yes, it's food fraud. But I'm not sure that anyone has been deceived, given that the ingredients of the sourdough are disclosed. The complainants say that authentic sourdough must be made only with flour, salt, and water. But do consumers agree? Perhaps consumers want sourdough from a supermarket to have a certain flavour and texture, but don't care much about what it's made from. There's no legal definition for sourdough in the United Kingdom. This means it would be up to the legal system to decide on a case-by-case basis if the breads are misleading to consumers or not. If misleading, then it's food fraud. If not misleading, then it's not food fraud. It's tricky. In a similar situation, blueberry bagels that don't contain blueberries have been tested in courts in the United States under similar circumstances. You can read about that in issue 27 of The Rotten Apple. Italian fakes or Italian-style foods. In many countries, Parmesan cheese is a style of cheese that has low moisture content, a hard texture and a strong flavour, but does not necessarily come from Italy. But in Europe, it's a PDO food, a food with a protected designated origin. And that means you can't call a cheese Parmesan unless it meets the rules for provenance and production methods. At least not in Europe. But if you buy Parmesan cheese that doesn't meet the PDO rules, is it fake? And is that food fraud? Well, it depends. Last week, an Italian industry association sent out a press release claiming that more than 2/3 of Italian foods worldwide are fake. To be specific, many foods that they say are purported to be Italian instead have no production or employment links to Italy. They claim that products with names like Parmesan cheese and Parma ham are fake if they are not genuine examples of, for example, Parmigiano Reggiano or fully compliant with European rules that legally define Parma ham. Other products they accuse of being fake include mozzarella, provolone, ricotta, and Chianti wine. Brand names that imply Italianness for products made elsewhere, such as the Pompeian brand olive oil made in California, are also accused of being misleading. But are they? Again, it's complicated. In Europe, the rules for these Italian products are relatively clear-cut, and they're being actively enforced. European Union border authorities seized 3 times more fake Italian products last year compared to previous years. But in countries outside Europe, the legal status of foods like mozzarella is much more muddy. The answer? It's all about the context. If local rules for food definitions and food labelling are being broken, then that's absolutely a problem. If not, then the question comes back to whether the products are misleading, and that's tricky. In short, food frauds and food fakes can be context dependent. Food fraud definitions usually require a form of deception or misleading of consumers. Deciding whether food marketing is misleading is not easy and is often left up to courts to decide on an individual case-by-case basis. Some foods, such as non-Italian sourced Parmesan cheese, are considered fraudulent or illegal in some markets, but are legally acceptable in others. And the sources, as always, are in the email and the website archives.